the Trans Narrative Podcast. Caroline.
Ooh, hello, welcome everyone. How are you holding up over there, Nina?
Doing quite all right. Staying chipper in spite of everything.
Yeah.
There you are, Tiffany.
Hi.
Yay. Hi, I'm here.
Tiffany Taylor, good to meet you.
You too, thank you.
The Memphis community has been so kind to the Trans Narrative Podcast, and I'm so grateful to have you here with us today. Hey everyone, it's Caroline. Before we get started, I want to take this opportunity to say that if you like content like this, be sure to tap that subscribe button and the notification tab to get updated on our newest episodes. It's really important that if you like queer inclusive content, that you subscribe, share, like with all of your friends, because the only way that we're going to shift the trans narrative into a positive direction and be able to get to a point where we can get to an equitable society is if we get messages out to the community like this with others. So please tap the subscribe button, share with your friends, send the link out, and most importantly, enjoy the show. Thank you. Before we introduce our guest today, Tiffany Taylor, I'd like to get a little background on who you are. So would you mind just letting us in a little bit about who you are and your background and what you're bringing to the table today?
Sure. My pronouns are they, them, also he, him. It just depends on the day. Some days you just don't, you feel a little bit more masculine than you do, like just your experience. I was born in Michigan, but my family said it is too cold up here, so they came down to Arkansas. So I was raised in the hills of Arkansas, where the hillbillies are. I promise you. I I left there as soon as I graduated high school. I needed to get out and see the world because I was that kid that was like, "Oh, there is so much more to this world than my little corner of it." So I went out and joined the military. Once I got done with that, I was very much in the closet at this time too, because the military, when I served, because it was before 9/11, it was don't ask, don't tell. And I kept my butt in the closet. And plus, growing up where I did, it was very strict. My family, I think they always knew it, but they would sort of kind of shun it so bad. And I grew up in the 80s with the AIDS epidemic and everything. So being gay was a horrible, horrible thing, in my mind at that time. But then, once I got out of the military, I just started growing in myself. I was, as I call it, doing my Oscar performance of being very straight, being married, having kids, doing the whole thing. I was even a Girl Scout leader. I mean, I nailed that. I nailed it the way I look at it. But then I just said, I'm sick and tired of being somebody I'm not. I don't want to perform anymore. So I came out, and my journey has just led me up until where I'm at now. And I actually, this month is my 1 year T anniversary. So this has been 1 year since I've been on T. And yeah. So this is like the end present of that anniversary for me. Is coming on this podcast and just putting my voice out there, because I really feel the trans community and really everyone in the LGBTQ community, okay, minus maybe a few TERFs and whatnot, we are very, I think we are some of the strongest people in this world because of everything that is thrown at us, and we still are brave enough, we still are kind enough, and we still put our voice and our words out there to say, I am here, I am queer, I'm not going anywhere, so y'all just better get over it. We are that. So thank you all for having me on here. Really appreciate it.
What we want to be is just a platform for people to be able to share their experiences, because we're all human. We all have things to share. And the more we're able to hear each other and give each other voices and platforms, we can spread the sympathy. We can spread, love and understanding rather than hatred and ignorance. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Somebody said, I go to a support group meeting on Thursdays at our local, pardon me, at our local LGBTQ plus organization. And somebody said, we can just make drag into a religion. Then they can't come after.
Wait, isn't it already don't we have men in dresses leading lots of different services around the world in Catholic, Methodist, and Anglican churches? Well, robes,
I
but
mean,
they're non-bifurcated
it's
garments. It's not quite the
you
same.
never know what's under those robes, is all I'm
100%.
saying.
Yeah.
And so we do, and I just started laughing about it and was like, actually, that is an awesome idea. We get to do, be like the churches. We can be tax free and everything. Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's go. Let's
tax-free
put
drag.
people
Let's
in.
do tax-free drag.
I'm well. I mean, we already have our first Reverend, the good moth. That's the good Reverend Moth now. And this is probably once they listen to it, it might be the first time they've heard that. So you're welcome, Moth.
You've been promoted to the head of a religion, and put that on your
Totally.
resume and your curriculum vitae.
The good mothership.
We are doing the work of building resumes here.
Yes, we're doing the good work. But hey, I'm in higher ed too, so I can build those resumes and sound everything really well.
Higher
Absolutely.
ed.
Yeah.
What exactly do you do?
I work at a local university here in town. I'm not going to name it just because, Tennessee being Tennessee, and I'll put this in there for my disclaimer so I'm not taking a court or anything. These are all my views and not where I work's views. It's out
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah.
Cover my booty.
Even if the name slips somehow, we're not involved with that.
Mhm.
Exactly. No way, shape, or form, does my opinion count for theirs. But I've worked in higher education for over 12 years. It was I'm gonna do this job because I get a discount. And I started as a janitor working 5 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I just sort of kind of happened into it and it was all great. And I was like, oh hey, this is sort of fun to do. And I'm a very sarcastic person.
Mhm.
So my sarcasm and my actually honestly my smartassness works really well in higher education compared to what I was trying to be of a high school teacher. I'm like, no, I cannot do this to these children. I might kill them. I can't do it. Cannot do it. And so here I am now, an admissions counselor for a graduate school. I talk to people all over the world, and they come in, and the lifelong learning is what we all should strive to do. And this podcast is a perfect example of that. We're all trying to learn something more about someone else and their experiences. So this fits in well professionally for me and personally.
Absolutely. Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Building those stronger connections and communities, communicating with each other effectively. I want to be like kind of an operator. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to know what resources I can find to do this or be a part of this community, I want to say, well, I know this person. They worked in Memphis on this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I can refer them to you. I think that's probably one of the best things I can do is just sort of have a directory of all the people that I can work with and network people more effectively together.
Yeah, you
Got
would fit in higher ed really well because that's what we do. You know somebody somewhere everywhere, so it's great.
Gotcha. So we're getting Tiffany joined on here.
Yay!
You're muted, Caroline.
Oh,
There
oh
we
my
go.
God.
Well, we saw the boat.
We did.
Tiffany, can you hear us okay? I'm not getting any audio at the moment. There was a mute.
I want to do the Finding Nemo thing and be like, oh, they touched the butt. Because every time I see boat now, I think of that. I can't help it.
I'm still seeing you're muted there, Tiffany, if you can hear us.
Hello, can you hear
There
me?
you are, Tiffany.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Yay!
Thanks for having me. I'm here.
Tiffany Taylor,
Oh my
good to meet you.
goodness.
You too. Thank you.
Tiffany, it is wonderful to meet you. I'm Mar Newell. I've I've looked at a lot of your Facebook posts and stuff, and you helped educate me on an area that I didn't understand so well, and actually been trying to work on like my ableism.
Mhm.
I know we all have our bad habits, and I know I have mine. So I'm just going to put it out there first. Thank you for helping me
Oh, well, thank
understand a little bit
you.
more about myself.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. And saying that, that it helps me means a lot. So, yeah, I'm glad to help.
Well,
Yeah.
hi,
No.
Tiffany. I'm Caroline. It's so nice
Hi.
to finally meet you. I'm so glad to have you here in the
You
Transnarrative.
too.
Yes, it's such a pleasure. So I'm Caroline. This is Athena, and this is Mar Newell. Mar is our first guest co-host of season 2, so we're really excited to have them here. And so, I'm really excited for this opportunity to share in this connection with you and everyone here. So glad to have you, Tiffany.
Thanks.
So, Tiffany, I heard that you live on a sailboat and travel around the world. I think that's the coolest thing. Can you tell me more about that?
Yes. My partner and I live on a sailboat. It's a cruising boat. So meaning we're planning on cruising it, more around the world. It's already been around the world before we bought it, and so we've spent the last 3 years, especially during the pandemic, kind of refitting it and redoing most of the systems. We do all the work ourselves. So we just finished hooking up the solar, and we've worked on so many different projects and systems on it. But we're based right now in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then our plan is next year really starting to go down the coast of California for a while, and then winter in Mexico, and then on from there. So we live on the boat full time, and plan to kind of follow warmer weather, hopefully, especially right now where it's quite cold, like in the 40s in California is not what we're used to. So yeah, that's been an adventure and a lot to learn, but fun experience as well.
Sounds
That
absolutely
is
beautiful. Do your own cruise. So there's a lot of
Yes.
work involved, it sounds like.
Yes, especially if you do the work yourselves, because we also want to really know our boat. Because if you're in the middle of the ocean, or we really want to go to like remote anchorages and places where a lot of the tourists don't go, and we want to meet the locals, that type of thing. And you have to really know inside and out, because there isn't just a place to get parts. You can't get parts sent to you, right away, or someone's not going to fix your boat. You're in the middle of the ocean and anything happens. So you also really kind of have to be your own maintenance crew and have all the tools. It's amazing the amount of tools we have on this boat.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and
Absolutely.
so yeah, that's a lot to learn, like how to do the projects. Things don't have manuals, or the parts are discontinued, and you have to now figure out some solution, and you have all these constraints because the boat's going to be in salt water or sunlight, or moving around, all these various things, and then part shipping delays, and manufacturers not understanding products, or not being
Mm-hmm.
honest about products, or et cetera, et cetera. So it's been a whole process.
A lot of negotiation. It sounds like probably a lot of bespoke parts. But you fit in right here with
Yes.
us. Speaking of bespoke parts, this is the Trans Narrative Podcast, and we want to welcome you. Just kind of tell you about like our format and our story, and then kind of give you a chance to introduce yourself by your own rules. We basically are here to focus on letting you tell your story. And basically relating however you want to your experience in how you've struggled and overcome things in forming bonds to find your community and help to make our community stronger in general. So, Tiffany Taylor, it is beautiful to meet you today. I just want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and what we'll be talking about today to make sure that we've got a good understanding of what our scope of the project is today. So, what can you tell us about us?
Oh, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Yeah, I'm Tiffany, and I am in the San Francisco Bay Area. As mentioned, I live on a sailboat with my partner, um, and I work primarily in performing arts, and I'm a dancer and also an accessibility consultant. I'm a queer person, in part of the LGBT community, and having those intersectional identities, I think, informs a lot of my work in performing. And I do a lot of performance work and accessibility work around accessibility in disabled spaces, in queer spaces, how those identities intersect, and about access um, for the disabled community, for the blind and low vision community, as I'm low vision myself, and making sure that blind people have access to all different types of spaces, and talking a lot about ableism, and also the access to especially sexuality, orientation, all those type of things that we are often very much left out of in the conversation, especially for folks that are blind, not having access to media, or visual representations or conversations around any of those things. And so I um, do a lot of work in those spaces, as well as I mentioned, in performance spaces too, around art and ableism in theater, and live performance venues. And I also have a background in theater and performance through school, and I've learned what how those programs are structured, and being a performer, working on stage, backstage, being an audience member who enjoys performance, as a person with a disability. So those are kind of a lot of the areas that I work on and focus on a lot when I'm not working on the sailboat, which has its own challenges to adapt, being a disabled person living on a sailboat, and a queer person and a person in a same-sex relationship, as well, and how that all kind of folds together.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of did mention like a lot of areas in which we can try and learn and grow and kind of be inclusive. Obviously, this is an audio format here through the podcast. We also do have other visual mediums, but I caught myself after I was introduced just waving to you, but I thought, okay, I've got to reassess what my resources are, what your resources are, and how we can meet together better.
Okay.
I felt this moment of a bit of shame here, just thinking I can't communicate like that. It's not where we're at. So I just want to maybe help us to communicate best through this. How can we best be aware of your impairments or your disability and make sure that you're included in every way we possibly can?
Mhm. Yeah, I think for this, thank you for mentioning that, that happened as well, and calling attention, bringing it up and saying, this is something that I did. And then I realized, what that means. I think that's definitely a first step, because it's so often easy to just overlook that, or, oh, I just waved to the blind person, I'm not going to mention that. And that happens a lot in public too, all the time, where people will tell me, oh, the person just waved at you. And then they realize they just waved at the person that may probably won't be able to see them. Some people some people with low vision can also see the screen even on Zoom. So some people might be able to see that. For me, I am not able to. So usually it just works best for me if there are if there are like different people speaking, to say who's speaking, maybe if that's just to inform that. Some blind people like visual descriptions if there is something on the screen, or how people identify in the space, to make that accessible for me. That's a practice I'm okay with, but not something that I necessarily require or would really ask. So all I really need is just people being aware of what's in the space. But I don't need any
Yeah.
accommodations really much for a Zoom virtual space
Oh,
for myself.
absolutely. Well, one thing I've noticed a lot, and especially in spaces that are, more leftist or friendly spaces, generally speaking, there's been a lot of the transcription of images and memes and things like that on Facebook groups. I think that's
Hmm.
been great to see and kind of understand, like, from the perspective, like I've got friends even who are starting to undergo like macular degeneracy and things like that. So
Hmm.
I'm going to start to have to be like aware of the things that I'm posting, even in my own private groups, as opposed to
Right.
like public forums and things. So I think we can all be a little bit more aware in accessibility features like that. How does that affect your spaces socially? I know like using cell phones is a bit different. I work with cell phones myself, but a lot of visually impaired people will still have like the readers and the other assistance tools. So I think that's really cool how technology is helping us overcome some of these gaps.
Absolutely. I think especially right now, the pandemic has really highlighted that. And I think some of your previous guests have touched on this as well, about doing hybrid meetings, virtual meetings, learning Zoom. It can make a lot of spaces more accessible. But then there is also that learning curve. So there are lots of guides that have been written as well about how to use Zoom with a screen reader. So for example, I'm doing this call on my phone right now on Zoom, and I use VoiceOver on the iPhone. So that's a speech program that's built into the Apple products, that's included, and it reads everything on the screen. But it also depends on how the apps are developed. So just because an app is on the phone doesn't mean it's going to be readable or accessible. And so it also really has to be on developers and people making any content. So memes, GIFs, websites, social media, pictures. The big thing would be is making sure, do you know if they're accessible, or having a consultant test that. And that's something else that I do, and I come in and say, this works, this doesn't work. And then for media, especially, really using image descriptions or descriptions of videos, as well as even transcripts if possible. And these things take time and effort, and sometimes money and a lot of resources, but especially transcripts for podcasts for deaf folks, people in the deaf community, hard of hearing, people who are deaf blind. Transcripts can be really helpful, because then you can have the description of all of the text or the
Yeah.
spoken language, but also any of the other audible things that might be going on, and that can be read in Braille for people maybe who are deaf blind. So just, that making that available, that's, I think the biggest thing is, how does that work? And in
Yeah.
person, there are also a lot of different tips, I could give. I think really the big thing is, I have to just say is, treating people with disabilities as, a part of society, as you would anybody else. Because so often I think people get nervous, about how to say things. I know you mentioned, oh, I waved to you earlier.
Mhm.
And I would say, that happens a lot. So I like, I notice those things, laugh about those things, you learn. Also saying, language, like using the word see or watch.
Yeah.
I use
Yeah.
those words all the time, even though I'm not actually watching a video. I still say, oh, I watched a movie. But I've had people come up to me, even, having conversation about movies. And then a month later it came up to me, my partner, and one person said, I felt so awkward last time and we didn't even know what she was talking about. And she said, well, we were talking about movies. And I said, I watched a movie. So she was fixated on this for,
Mhm.
a month.
Yeah.
And she said this word, instead of asking, or I'm nervous, I don't know what to do. And so I'd much rather have people ask me, is it okay to use this word? And I can just say right off the bat, yes. For me, that's part of language. So you don't have to feel nervous about avoiding certain
Mhm.
I even noticed, so when I was scrolling through some of your
words.
Facebook,
And if there's something that for some reason
Oh,
doesn't,
oh,
we cut out there a little bit, Tiffany.
I'm here.
uh,
Mhm.
uh-oh,
Uh,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
there was about like a
No.
10-second gap where it cut out there. If you could rewind about
Oh, okay.
15 seconds or so.
Oh, just saying about don't being afraid of using certain terms. And if something doesn't work, I can, fill it in or
Mhm.
explain why.
When I went to as I got to know you a little more on the Facebook, I noticed that when you had photos on your post that there was descriptions below. And so when I went to go start the promotionals for this week's episode, I thought, well, Tiffany's not able to see this. And I thought, well, what can I do? And I thought back to that and I thought description, describing what it is that is in the photo. And then I thought, well, why can't I do that going forward in every episode? Because it's not, it's not something that I thought about. And I'm grateful that I have beginning to get that awareness. But that's something that I learned this week, that using
Well, I
descriptions
appreciate
in
that.
media, yeah, it's well, I just it was, and it's interesting because then it requires me to think about, how I'm presenting and how I'm talking and how I'm portraying media. Because if I'm only presenting media in a certain way and it's not accessible to everyone, well, that's not something that I want to try to ensure that this show is accessible to everyone. And that means that I have to take the time to do things beyond what I normally day to day would do, because it's not something that I see. So it's something that I'm learning, and I'm grateful that
Well, thank you.
am
I
learning.
appreciate, really appreciate those descriptions, because I noticed too. Yes, when you sent me those photos, they automatically had descriptions, and I really appreciate that, because meant a lot to me that I didn't have to ask. And I think that goes a long way in this places where there's often so much ableism, or so many people around us are typically not disabled or non-disabled, and then um, have to always be the person to advocate for yourself, or bring up, can I ask for accommodations? But you don't know if it's necessarily a safe space. So if someone automatically offers that or says, what do you need? It means a lot.
Yeah, Caroline or Tiffany, I apologize. I was looking at Caroline. Sorry. I before we started this, and Caroline told me, okay, here's the person we're gonna talk to, Miss Tiffany. And I went and looked at your Facebook stuff, and you already know. I already told you, thank you for that. But I was like, how can I best like make Tiffany feel part of what we're doing? You know, just because vision impaired just doesn't see the way that you don't see the world the way I see the world. And so I was googling how best to interact, how to do this. And the one thing that every website that I looked at, which I don't look at just one, I can't help it. I'm in
Mhm.
higher ed, so my background is how many sources can I get?
Yes.
But it was always ask, ask,
Yes.
ask, ask.
Yes.
And then it just took me back to I my oldest child, who is about to graduate from college, so I feel really old at that point. Um, they were in Girl Scouts, and one of the people we had there, was actually vision impaired too. And when I was trying to do different kind of activities and stuff, I always had to think about how can this best come across to them too. And I never thought about it. So I for those people, and I mean you've already touched on it. So but the rest of us, how for our media, rather than just not only adding those descriptions and stuff, what are other ways that we can best serve like a population of people who don't, like I said, don't see the world the way we see it? You guys have such a totally different, I think all your senses are different than what like our senses are.
Yeah, I think it's
So
just like as I mentioned, the main thing with media would be is descriptions and access to the visual elements, audible elements, all just making sure that 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 is included, and even audio descriptions if you're making a video and they have the resources to have it actually described instead of just only typing out the
We're having a little bit more audio difficulty here, Tiffany. Are you there, Tiffany? Can you hear me?
You mentioned. I again appreciate that you've done the sole person that people go to. There's some there. Let's see. So there's like an assumed free labor that comes along with being disabled, or people think you're going to offer more education for free. So I appreciate that people do their research, as well. And I'm not their only resource.
Well, something else that I noticed was that I read a few of your posts, and I noticed that a lot of people come under the impression that your friends and your family kind of take on the responsibility, and they kind of neglect to consider that you're still able to do many things. And you touched on how people have often overlooked you because they don't think that you're able to do the things that able people are able to do. And it's sad that they don't ask you, they ask your partner. This is one of the things I read, and I hope that is something that we can begin to break, that stigma on people with limited access to things.
Yes, I think often it's so interesting, being around in public and with my partner. Some people think that she's automatically my aide, or she's a relative or something, because I'm also disabled. And there's this like myth that disabled people don't want or need relationships. So you don't get seen in that way. And then being in the same relationship, and then just being disabled, people think she's automatically there to help me by default, and that they don't have to offer help. And also that I can't offer help to people because I have a disability, and the bar and the standards are so low for what blind people can do. And it's not the same as if someone just closed their eyes and couldn't see one day. For me, I was born blind, and so I've learned a lot of tools and I'm used to it. So it's not this big scary thing as it is for someone who just loses their vision and doesn't have any coping strategies or adaptive tools yet, or community. And community can be an empowering thing. And I'm used to being blind, so we can move on from that. And like I can help with other things that and don't have to focus on that.
oh, you talked
My
about sorry Caroline, I just jumped on you.
No,
I just
no,
I'm really actually interested. You said you studied dance, is that correct?
So I studied theater. I have a bachelor's
Oh,
in theater, but I do dance. So yeah, I professionally dance with like an integrated company. So we have dancers with and without disabilities, and we actually work. We're actually creating new work currently. So I'm like one of the collaborators that works with in the company as a performer.
what type of dance do y'all do? Because I mean, here in Memphis, we got juking going on. So I
Yes.
want I'm like I want to know what type, because that's really interesting to me. I don't have the rhythm for it, but I'd love to hear everybody else who does.
Yeah. So for me, I do in a certain way. I do an easier way out. It's kind of it's more based a lot in like movement and like and language and description. Like what am I feeling? What am I sensing? How am I describing movement actually? How does it feel? It would be based on sound or rhythm, but it's not. I'm not doing a set maybe style or a certain way of it's all choreographed. A lot of it is more give you the freedom to here's a prompt, and then make movement based on that prompt, and then how do you make that accessible to people with different sensory modalities. So I'm not doing a set style in the way of like it's not just ballet or what one specific maybe common type.
That's cool. I really like it because yeah, we go to different events here in Memphis, and I see our communities and stuff doing the jukin and all these other kind of dances, and I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do that because I'm old and I have bad knees, so I'm just not gonna put my body through that. But it's always struck me that like you can learn so much about a person from the way that they're dancing because I've always loved theater
Hmm.
and stuff, and it's good to know that like is that can you okay, I'm trying to get the words out for this question, I apologize. Do you think that dancing is sort of kind of one of your senses that you use to communicate with the world in general?
I think it could be. I think it definitely can be. It's a form of expression, of course, and how does that come through? What does that mean? But also, I'm kind of in a certain way making it up as I go with the collaborators I work with because a lot of disabled people are left out of accessible dance or dance in general, or classes are not made accessible or welcoming, or the training, the degree pathways, the performance pathways, because there's so much ableism and barriers in that you're kind of starting out at a lower level because there aren't the doors open to you. And so I think it is definitely a way of expression that, and my movement style might look different than somebody else's, but also I think, being blind, you don't have the same pathways in a certain sense. Like if you're not given the freedom to like run around or like do bigger movements or like learn, even a lot of blind people are left out of gym class even growing up, or adaptive physical education. So then if you don't have those kind of built in, like, oh, I don't even know how to do a warm up because like how do you make a what's a push up or what's a whatever the
Yeah.
exercise is. So then
Yeah.
you're putting that into dance and you're working with other dancers who've had all this professional training, and now you're coming in going, I don't even know, I don't know what's happening right now, I don't fit in this level. And how do you work within that? And I've been working with a lot of dancers who are very inclusive and supportive and have taught me hands on or with a lot of description of like, okay, I have a background in ballet. So today, if I'm leading warm ups, my background might be based more in that. So how do I accommodate that if you don't know what that is or what those, movement terms are?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Like it's like exercising is, I don't know. It's a very highly internal thing. Dance would be, I think, meditative without trying to worry about a visual aspect. I would always worry about looking awkward for myself or feeling self-conscious and things like that. If it's just a free mode of expression, I would feel like that would be a bit more meditative, but it's there's also like you're wondering maybe what your standards are to compare. It's a different world entirely for sure, and a lot of the things that we have to pick up on are visual cues. And in the world of being transgender, for example, a beard or a dress, those kinds of visual markers from a distance can really be 100% of somebody's, expectations of your gender from a distance. How has that impacted the way that you've possibly interacted with the world or with people around you?
Yeah, I think that especially, what stands out to me, I think, is with, you know, uh, when I was dating or looking, for partners, it would be tricky because I've always been blind, but then, sort of to my queer identities later on, and even after college, really, for me, it was sort of like, oh, right after I moved away from college and a lot of those experiences, kind of back home, I'm from Michigan, and not a lot of opportunities in various ways there. And so I was a lot of isolated in a lot of ways, and not being able to even really go in the community because of like the lack of public transit or support or community around. So then coming to California, I definitely noticed a lot different environment and more queer people, more disabled people, more queer disabled people, but still being in queer spaces, even knowing who's in the room, knowing or even knowing like where's a safe space or someone doing something to indicate like, oh, visually are they, how are they fitting in or how are they standing out if they wanting to be noticed maybe in a certain way or not, or just glancing around the room like, are there couples, is there a table of people mingling, are there people that are open to wanting someone to talk to? Is there not? Is there, and then being often, especially in queer spaces, being the only disabled person, then, and, because you don't have access to that visual culture, it can definitely be tricky to find that out. And also I think with voices too, I think if you haven't had experience with anyone in the trans community or non-binary or anything, that you might also make judgments, as a blind person too, like, well, this person's voice sounds this way, so then it's going to indicate this or this when it doesn't. But that's something that you have to kind of unlearn those internalized views that come with all the stuff we're kind of taught. I think that's something that I've learned being exposed to more people and just being in more places of not gonna really assume anything, and I
Yeah.
try to be as open as possible. And then until someone tells me, what are you, what whatever the thing is about them, then or is that even relevant? Does it actually, does that matter to what we're doing right now? Like
Mhm.
what I think, what I think that means. And so just trying to figure out, those type of things can make it tricky, as a blind person because you're not getting those visual information, but then it also kind of leaves it a little bit more open to kind of learn those things in other ways, or leave it up to the person to kind of tell you what they think is important, or, because you're not deciding just based on noticing visually something. You're not making assumptions in the same way. You can definitely make judgments and assumptions as a blind person about people. So I don't want to the myth that, oh, blind people aren't going to be racist, they're not going to be, whatever it is, because there are these myths of like, oh, well, you don't see that, so like you can't be prejudiced or you can't be harmful. Like, no, that's absolutely not true. But I think you just kind of perceive it and you learn about it maybe differently.
Gotcha. Mhm. Like I know a lot of technologies have been developed specifically to like assist and help us like overcome our various difficulties and impairments. Obviously, phones and technology, being able to have a reader anywhere is incredibly useful. Like other technologies, like for surgical remedies and things like that, they all still won't necessarily like leave us though with an equal footing. We're always going to have a difference, to help make up for. Like moving the future. Do you think that like the like making disabilities vanish through surgeries, like having like national health care
Mhm.
is generally going to happen? I mean, that's a question I suppose another, but like, do you think that would be a good push to help people with disability? There's been a lot of conversation about like blindness in Cuba. They work to cure blindness and make that
Mhm.
effective because people were more productive in their lives without blindness. What do you think about programs like that designed specifically to help people with visual impairments, but also kind of as a focus to make them more productive workers specifically?
I think that's a pretty ableist perspective, actually, because it's really showing um, that life has to be better because
Yeah.
like 2020 vision is normal again, intentionally with that word. So blindness is lesser.
Mhm.
It is something that needs to be fixed. This the medical view of it must be fixed, therefore it's a problem when it doesn't have to be. It does make, like, for me, it makes things tricky, but a lot of my barriers are because of society, because people think, and people put up barriers and they think it's a problem. They want to fix me, but my vision doesn't mean I have a bad quality of life. And if people were less ableist and if people worked on technologies to help me, or people didn't have so many barriers up for employment, and if employers were educated and parents and teachers, and the first message wasn't doom and gloom, I think that could be a lot healthier. And but my vision itself doesn't cause me really any medical problems. I don't have pain. I don't have like it doesn't really get in my way.
Mhm.
So for me, like, I don't really need it fixed just to have the quote unquote normal vision. And because it's also, I can have a full life with being blind, and to say, to connect it to productivity and capitalism and work and saying people are less productive. There's so many barriers to like learning technology, to just educating employers and like, what can I do when they're freaking out about, oh my God, a blind person is going to sue me. I can't hire them. They can't be productive.
Mm.
Um, Whereas if everyone was given the tools to succeed, and if I was given the tools to be successful at a job, and the other employees and the people in power in those jobs recognize that I can contribute, and they worked to actually alleviate barriers instead of ignoring the fact that they are putting up the barriers to me succeeding, then I could be productive. So the barriers to productivity are sometimes because of a disability, which is okay. And it's valid and important and healthy to say, I can't do something. And that's okay. It's not a weakness.
Yeah.
But also, we need everybody else to take accountability and say, oh, we're putting up the barriers against you. But instead, they're often blaming us for being less productive when they're the ones that are putting up the barriers that make us less productive.
Ooh, she was preaching. She was preaching, y'all.
Felt that
Oh
one.
no. Yeah, no, that was like, ooh. There were some good ones in there, Caroline. That'll be an easy edit on that one. It'll be like, ooh.
Each week on the Transnarrative Podcast, we want to highlight a piece of the bigger stories that impact our lives, the laws and attitudes and cultures that can help or hinder us as transgender people in the United States. The stories that cisgender people want to tell for us or about us are going to be missing in critical details. They won't help us to clear up our perspective. We want to show how we've struggled, how we are struggling, and also how we will overcome.
Oh, this week on Capturing the Narrative, Caroline Penny. Oh my God, that's me. Hi. Okay, for realsies though. All through this country, we're seeing an all-out assault on the LGBTQI+ community. And as culture wars continue, I personally feel an obligation to do what I can to shift the trans narrative into a more positive light, highlighting the beauty and diversity of our community. All my life, I sought to belong, to feel like I mattered, that I meant something to someone. When I found belonging within, when I realized that I matter and that I mean something to someone, me, found myself a part of something bigger than myself. I found a community that struggled like I had. I felt true belonging when I found people like me. I share many weekends with some of those many people who have shown me I matter and that my work, whatever it is, isn't insignificant. Like most, we started out with different intentions on the direction of what we're starting in, are thrown into an activism role or become a representative, no matter how hard you try not to. It's important to me to remember that I'm not speaking on behalf of the community or think that I'm in a place of authority. I am of the community who has struggled and understands that struggle and has had to overcome that. And I share my journey by chronicling the events of our world weekly and meet with the members of this loving community who have made me feel more like myself day by day. We are more than advocates for equity, diversity, and inclusion. And while those are major parts of who we are, we're so much more. And I hope in time we'll get to share all those parts of who we are. But right now, we're called to act and do what we can. And tonight I wanted to speak on a word that describes what many marginalized communities went through and what the trans and non-binary community specifically are going through right now. And that's a genocide. There's no other way around it. Today, we're capturing the 10 Steps to Genocide, brought to you by the Montreal Holocaust Museum. Number 1, classification. Groups in a position of power will categorize people according to ethnicity, race, religion, or nationality, employing an us versus them mentality. Prevention. Creating universalistic institutions that foster social cohesion. I feel the first point needs to be addressed most of all. Being transgender may or may not have a genetic component, but the most common experience could be expressed as a discontinuity of belief about one's own gender in comparison with what others expect. The institutions the institutions to universalize in this case are gender norms. The categories are here not as an immaterial to an argument of transgenocide, due as the bills in question themselves. While it wouldn't be possible to try to eradicate a genetic expression or a component of human experience, the tactics engaged are intended to treat the transgender person as such a contagion or social degeneracy. Quote. 2. Symbolization. People are identified as, quote, Jews, Roma, Tutsis, etc., and made to stand out from others with certain colors or symbolic articles of clothing. Prevention. Ban the symbols and the hate speech and all clothing meant to discriminate against groups. Transgender people self-identify and rally together with their own colors. But a consequence of bigotry against us is that everyone's gender must come under scrutiny to satisfy the restrictive gender roles that conservatives want to enforce. To enforce these rules previously, people were subjected to harassment and inspection and jailed if wearing 3 or more pieces of clothing deemed to be for a sex other than the one assigned at birth. Allowing people to wear what they choose regardless of gender helps to remove this prejudice. 3. Discrimination. A dominant group uses laws, customs, and political power to deny the rights of other groups. The powerless groups may not be granted full civil rights or even citizenship. Prevention. Ensure full political empowerment and citizenship rights for all groups in a society. Discrimination on the basis of nationality, ethnicity, race, or religion should be outlawed. Restricting speech about transgender issues or informing youth is being criminalized in multiple states. Customs commonly exclude intersex or non-binary people. Surgeries allowed to people for reasons other than being transgender are being denied. We seek equal treatment for all under the law in a fair healthcare system that addresses gender inequalities and indeterminacies. Number 4, dehumanization. The diminished values of the discriminated group is communicated through propaganda. Parallels are drawn with animals, insects, or diseases. Prevention. Promptly denounce and punish perpetrators and make hate crimes and speech culturally unacceptable. Sanction all incitements to commit genocide. We take this opportunity to acknowledge the many, many, many voices that remain platformed and funded, calling transgender people, quote, demons, inhuman, subhuman, mutants, etc. End quote. I am not here for them. I'm here fucking mutants. I'm here for the people who want to evolve society into something even more human and beautiful. 5. Organization. A state, its army, or militia design genocidal killing plans. Prevention. Outlaw membership in these militias and sanction these leaders. Impose armed embargoes on the countries involved and create commissions of inquiry. We have discussed the many ways in which the police function as a standing military of the United States. In Missouri, a proposed bill has been aimed to deny gender-affirming care to transgender prisoners, some who have already undergone surgery and don't have the ability to produce sex hormones. Multiple groups have committed to doing harm to transgender people, some through online harassment and some through destruction of property, others through armed conflict. Disarming fringe groups in the US is not impossible. Polarization. Propaganda is employed to amplify the differences between groups. Interactions between groups are prohibited, and the moderate members of the group in power are killed. Prevention. Protect these moderate members and human rights groups, seize the assets of the oppressors, and refuse their access to international travel. The context in which this fits the description of genocide is different from other contexts in that, until very recently, transgender people were expected to live entirely in the shadows. American history has no deficit of blood, and many of the matriarchs of the left held our autonomy and their values. Number 7, preparation. The victims are identified, separated, and forced to wear symbols. Deportation, isolations, and forced starvation. Death lists are drawn up. Humanitarian aid, armed international interventions, or major support for the victims to ensure their ability to defend themselves. This has been historically accomplished with prisons or gay conversion camps. Recent bills propose to make insurance companies indefinitely liable for detransition, and bills in some states indicate a likelihood to require state-sponsored detransition if the legislature is emboldened. Number 8, persecution. Victims are identified and isolated based on their ethnic or religious identity. Death lists are drawn up. In state-sponsored genocides, members of victim groups may be forced to wear identifying symbols. Their property is often expropriated. I'm not good with good words today. Prevention. Regional organizations in the international community must mobilize themselves to assist or help the victim. The Texas Department of Transportation was conducted by Governor Greg Abbott and released the names of gender changes on driver's license to identify transgender people in the state. In preparation, many transgender people have already fled the state, and other states have proposed sanctuary bills to render aid to those fleeing for their safety. Number 9, extermination. The massacres begin. The perpetrators see their actions as extermination, since they do not consider their victims to be entirely human. Prevention. Only large-scale armed interventions can stop genocide. The international community must support the operation by providing air transport, equipment, and financial aid. In a lot of ways, we are already here. We have seen massacres of the LGBTQI plus community, but by individuals rather than a state, as of yet. This is the reason for the most common refrain among the left to arm ourselves. Over time, driven to dehumanize us, blame us for their problems, treat us as entirely other, the components to render a genocide are all in place. And number 10, denial. The perpetrators of genocide deny having committed their crimes. Victims are often blamed. Evidence is hidden and witnesses are intimidated. Prevention. An international tribunal or national court, an international court must prosecute the criminals. Public education. The individuals who have committed violence against the LGBTQI community are deemed unhinged by the same lunatic voices that cheer the results, if not the actions. There are calls to ban drag to protect children because of the violence incited by far-right groups trying to close them down or shoot them up. At times, it seems disheartening that so many countries have an enlightened view on gender issues. There is no international tribune to call for. Almost all of us are struggling with a new wave of understanding. Using the words transgenocide is intentional and may seem provocative. The pieces that don't fit the words, however, fit the spirit of the steps discussed. If we can learn so much about how to thrive in times of persecution from history of genocide, the tendencies of authoritarianism, and the tactics of resistance from people who have been targeted before. We use these words not to inspire fear, but boldness. We don't want to be silent during the days when these words burn in our souls. We want our history of being repressed and marginalized, suppressed and dehumanized to be over. We want to live free and be our authentic selves. We want the children of the generations that come after us to be free to be authentically themselves as well. The conservative fear of castration, impotence, infertility are all scare tactics, and I believe in a more human future, and it's one where we listen to people of all walks of life equally. I happen to be a member of a group that society is deciding on whether or not to silence, on whether or not children should even exist in the same space as me.
So I want to lighten the mood a little because like we said, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves too. I always tell my kids, don't assume because you become the first 3 letters in that word when you do. And work on the spelling words on top of life lesson there. But living on a boat, first off, my dream, like my retirement dream, is to build my own schoolie and like drive around the country and stuff. That's like
Yes.
that, and having that freedom to go around and do that. I know things that I would love to go and visit places and stuff. People, food. God, I love food. That's why I got belly.
Hmm.
But what's a place that you're looking forward to visiting and experiencing when you guys start traveling again?
Hmm. Well, so many places.
I know,
um,
right?
yeah. I really someday I really like the UK, and I've studied at Oxford, and I've taken trips to Scotland, and next on my bucket list I really want to go to is Ireland, but that takes a long
Yes.
time to get to on a boat. But someday we might sail over there. But the more immediate future, we definitely want to spend I think next year winter in Mexico, not this coming winter but the following winter in Mexico
Mhm.
for the season. And so I'm definitely looking forward to that, and all different kind of anchorages and places around, and tacos and margaritas and all the things. So warm weather.
Oh
So
yeah. No, that's actually, Ireland is one of my like bucket list spots too. I just can't help it.
mhm.
What inspired y'all to like just up and go live on a sailboat? I think that's like the coolest thing. I think that's so cool because I love the ocean. Like the ocean is my safe space.
Mhm.
I know that's funny, but it's my safe space, and I love it. So living on a sailboat would just be a dream, and you're living that dream.
Well, that's a lot of work. And I think when I met my partner, she was already living on a boat, and has wanted to really. She planned on solo sailing, kind of around wherever she took the fancy. But then we met, and then I just moved on this boat full time last year. So I'm kind of jumping in and learning how to sail and learning how to do the projects and everything. And it allows me to also work remotely, and travel around and bring your home with you. And especially in the Bay Area, it's so expensive for rent, and living somewhere, and you don't have to be attached to like that one physical place. That I'm up for being, and I love traveling, so I get to travel with my house and my person, and not have to pay the ridiculous rent prices, and that's at least pretty cool,
I
and be
guess
pretty self-sufficient.
sounds like one of the best part
Ooh.
about living on a boat is not having a landlord.
Right.
So when I
Yes.
hear living on a boat, like so I guess do you have an anchor that you just drop off in the middle of the ocean and just relax for a few days and then just go on to wherever you want to go throughout the world, or is there like a real schedule that you build to get to these places?
Well, right now we've been working on this boat, so we haven't taken it out much because we've been doing all the projects. But we're getting really close. So this summer, we're planning on spending the summer in the Sacramento Delta, which has lots of different marinas and anchorages. So you can, a lot of places where we can anchor. Going farther, after we leave California. So that is our plan. Is there are marinas you can get. Right now we're at a dock, but then you can go, certain places you go, you can't just anchor anywhere because there are so many derelict boats and abandoned boats, and it's a lot of complicated
Audience breaking up.
able to anchor out. So basically, the answer is yes, we're working on anchoring out, and you just drop the anchor, and you know, yeah, like chill out. Or at least, so where you're allowed to. You can't just go anywhere, but for the places that you can, that's what we're gonna do.
See, it just shows no matter where you go, you got bad neighbors.
Yeah, if you don't like them, you move. Basically, the weather runs the schedule. For the most part, it's the weather. The weather runs the show. So that's the biggest thing, is not being tied down as much as you can by like a schedule. Is just the weather predicts where you go.
Oh, yeah. So, where did you study for like dance and higher ed and the degrees? If you have, I'm sorry, I'm assuming I don't know. What is your degree in, or what did you study? I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, so I have a bachelor of arts in theater. I went to Adrian, which is like a tiny school that, yeah, tiny private liberal arts school. Yeah, so that's my formal when I dance. I dance and I work as an accessibility consultant and audio description consultant for a company called Just Curtis Gravity, which is based in San Francisco and in Berlin. And so I do a lot of hats. I'm also on the board of directors there, a secretary. So I do a lot of different things, but that's where a lot of my dance kind of comes from. And it initially stemmed from like contact improv based, and then sort of branched out to where it is now that I've kind of previously discussed, but isn't formal, degreed training, but that's like my main background. And I also took classes from Krishna Washburn, who teaches called Darkroom Ballet, which is ballet for blind people specifically. And I've done some workshops Access Dance in California, which is an integrated company that has dancers with and without disabilities. Many of them are wheelchair users. They come from a different aesthetic, but it's still inclusive dance.
Tiffany, your audio is cutting out a little bit. Do you know if there's an issue on your Wi-Fi connection?
It does that sometimes, but I think it's just um, comes back when it wants to.
Oh gosh, it keeps breaking in and out. It's okay. I think we got it. That. Can you hear
Yep.
me over here, Tiffany? Okay, because it keeps okay. I think we got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Maybe it's back.
Oh, there it
You're
is.
good. Yep.
It
There
goes
we
in
go.
and out.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, just technology in general.
Yes. But I also did basically I've done, various classes, acting classes, dance classes, and I did a acting class with it's called Access Acting Academy. And it's a training all for blind and low vision actors, led by Marilee Talkington, who is a low vision actor, and that was really great to have like an inclusive space of like all blind people getting together and like performing on stage. So I think that really stands out as an inclusive opportunity where I wasn't like the only disabled person in the program.
So, do you produce and like help create and write the plays and like help with the choreography?
So with the company I'm with now, with Just Curtis Gravity, which is the company I dance with, yeah, I'm collaborating. So we're creating a new piece right now. So I'm one of the performers in it, and there's 5 other performers, and we all kind of input our ideas. The choreographer inputs his ideas on the concept, and like right now we're talking a lot about like destabilizing vision as the central mode of observing dance. So it talks a lot about light and dark and what that means to us and all of that. So we are creating the pieces now. So that's primarily what I do. Is I actually am a performer, and we are creating them from the ground up. So I'm not performing in things that have already established or exist.
I think you said destabilizing vision in media. I've never heard it put that way, and I think that's my limitation, and that's something that I and others should consider. Like, what are some of those like limitations in dance? You said lighting and things like that. Could you elaborate on that a little bit, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, it's primarily so visual that it doesn't really come across even. So we do a lot of audio description with the company that I work with, and audio description for dance, but many blind people have never had access to dance. And so how do you describe that movement, and is it interesting or not? How do you describe it when you don't have any visual, any reference of it physically or visually? So figuring out making it accessible with sound, with audio description, with feeling some movements maybe before the show. It's called a haptic access tour that we also organize. So trying to figure out all those different ways and using different senses and feelings to make it as inclusive as we can, and not just let's all sit down and watch a show and it's totally silent and you're not getting any feedback or anything about what's going on.
I I think that's something that, we were talking earlier. You said that it's so great that technology is making it to where people with disabilities will feel more part of the normal. And it's like, well, and you really brought up the good point that like it's not it's people that aren't disabled that are putting up the barriers in place. And so instead of making it a society where you're trying to quote cure the disability, I think again, like you said, make our society inclusive and accessible to all. And that means reconfiguring how we present ourselves in every aspect. How do we educate? How do we present media? Because I was thinking, is it appropriate to have it to where schools where it's, just schools for people of disabilities, or is that a barrier that we are putting in, and that we're not learning how to have an education system that is inclusive to everyone. So
Yes, that's very tricky, I think. That's definitely a complicated, complicated subject for sure, but something is definitely worth examining and really getting into.
absolutely.
Yeah, in higher ed, I know that everybody's always trying to include more and more, of the different populations that we deal with. And one of the things was, how do we, supply books, and how do we get people to do that? And then audiobooks came, started really gaining more and more popularity. And I'm like, well, that helps. Do you think, like, what can we do? And I'm asking your professional opinion, because you definitely, with your organizations and everything, I feel like you are definitely a person that could help me help my career field, to be more inclusive. So what can we do better, as far as opening up the classroom doors, especially with, I'm in graduate school, so getting a master's and a doctorate, I feel like we're not as inclusive as we could be, at least where I am. And so
Mhm.
how can we do better? If you can give me your opinion, I'd very much appreciate it.
Well, I think it's about, first of all, just having a bar, or some kind of higher bar that, like, disabled people can contribute, and then when they say there's a barrier, to actually listen to that, and even making just an approachable space of saying if someone needs accommodations, if someone needs support, but then also having an understanding or a training or a way of knowing, hey, what is accessible, even the basics, like, or is there an access services department, are we required to provide media in an accessible format? Yes, you are. Knowing the laws, knowing, how do you make a PDF accessible, knowing, like, you don't need to know every single point of these things, but even having an outline or a general idea, these are some barriers that people with various disabilities might face. They need a space to discuss that, and they need a space to have resources to say, this is what I need. And there needs to be a team that can help figure out how to meet those needs, instead of brushing them off or putting it all on the student, or, you know, giving some volunteer, hey, you scan this book, but then not knowing how to make that book accessible to the person. Just because it's a scanned document doesn't mean it's a readable document to a blind person. It has to be, coded correctly and, scanned correctly to read with a screen reader. So it's not as simple as just, okay, we scanned it, there you go. It has to really be follow up with, is this working? Is this not working? And what do we need to do without making it all on the disabled student?
Yeah. And as you've kind of
That's
shared,
great.
you're part of that demonstrative process, or part of the process to kind of test. So, what could we do as part of your community to make sure that we are helpful to people who need to be integrated better, people with visual impairments, but also just other disabilities that we can be aware of? What would you like to see us change or make more accessible?
I think just overall, I mean, it really comes down to just welcoming people with disabilities, even, and having statements of saying, disabled people are included. Like, I had a virtual presentation where someone said, if you need to, like, eat during the presentation, or stim, or move around, or clean, or sleep, or whatever it is, like, that's okay. And, making these statements of, hey, we recognize there are disabled people in our communities, and we want to know how to help you, and we want to listen to the answer of what you need. Because so many people think we don't exist, or we don't participate, or they don't listen if we need help, or they don't listen to how we need help. So it's really about making that space open and following up and listening to what people are saying, because we're doing the talking, but people aren't doing the listening.
Speaking of that,
There's a
where
point.
let me ask you, because it's not, so often when people speak with people with disabilities, they go off and they try to get an education lesson out of the individual, and I want to know, where can we look in resources, in things that will help us do better in our pursuit of
Mhm.
accessibility, because it's not the jobs of the people to explain that and to give an education lesson and to school people that do not deal with those disabilities. And so where can we go to find that information and learn ourselves so that it's
Mhm.
not it's not dominated in conversation, because again it's about equity and ensuring that everyone's treated the
Yeah.
same and that
Yes.
their rights are met. And so it's not right that people
Right.
that deal with things are bombarded with, okay, well now, oh, you're like, tell me everything about it. How do I, so where can we go to learn ourselves?
There are a lot of resources. Definitely, I mean, even social media has tons of different pages and groups, and things moderated by disabled people, disabled queer people. Even just doing a book search. Audible even has a lot of books. There's a Disability Visibility Project. There's also the Longmore Institute on Disability at San Francisco State. There are a lot of books written about like disabilities for allies, how to be an ally. There's cannot remember the book title right now, but the author I believe is Emily Ladau, and she writes a really good like 101 book about being an ally to the disability community. And just so many books. Jude Human has a great book as a disabled person. If anyone has seen the film Crip Camp on Netflix, definitely that's worth checking out. Information about the 504 movement. We're talking about education, the IEPs, and there's plans called the 504 plan. That is from the 504 movement, which was the largest occupation of a federal building in U.S. history, which was for a month in San Francisco in the 70s. A bunch of disabled people occupied the federal building to get legislation signed, and nobody knows about that plan. So definitely the 504 movement is worth checking out. And like intersectionality, and they communicated out the windows with sign language interpreters. They had the Black Panthers brought them food. They had so many allies coming in from all over the place, but it was really the disabled people that got the job done.
All right, that's a whole movie in itself. We need that. I mean, we had Coda last year, promoting the sign language and everything. That's the next movie right there.
Should be.
Okay, somebody needs to get that out there. I'm not, I don't know anybody in Hollywood. So if anybody else does, or anybody listening does, help us out. Talk to Tiffany. I think perfect producer right there. Trying to help you out, Tiffany.
Thanks.
Get you a little money here for that boat, so you guys can travel in style.
All right.
Today we're facing a huge challenge because we really didn't design this world to serve for everyone.
One of our greatest barriers to making progress when it comes to being more inclusive is that we have a tendency to design and engineer things for ourselves.
90% of companies prioritize diversity, 4% consider disability.
This is a 1.3 billion population we're talking about. It's a market that is not being tapped into.
With the fourth industrial revolution, our aim should be to attain inclusive growth, which really benefits everyone.
These individuals and voices need to be intrinsic to the development of projects, legislation, from the very moment of the conception of the idea. Otherwise, we're still creating within the framework and lenses and biases that exist within the society.
If just under 20% of our global market has a disability, how can you serve that market if you don't understand it internally in your business?
As technology changes, we will need to think about how it can, in fact, augment human capability of different abilities, give them the skills so that they can fully participate in our economies.
Así como existen múltiples diversidades en el universo, también existen diversidades en capacidades, generan potencialidades que pueden ser aprovechadas en beneficio no solo de las personas con discapacidad, sino de toda la sociedad.
Some of the car manufacturers have started introducing these exoskeletons into their production line. On the one hand, you could think of these as helping protect people who have normal physical abilities, or you could imagine that these same exoskeletons could help people who before would not have been able to do the job, but now they can.
The best is to think about these as not assistive technologies, but really come at the product and service with universal design principles.
Hello. 你好.
How are you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
你们是在家还是在学校? You are at home or at school?
We are all at school right now.
There's not one product or service that fits everyone, but there is one mindset that everybody benefits from, is the full human experience.
Making sure that we think inclusively whenever we build something, because somebody who doesn't have any disability today is not guaranteed that he won't have a disability tomorrow.
Maybe we can move to the point of thinking beyond this idea of differently abled meaning less than something, but that we're all differently abled.
The greatest force for change is going to be the importance of individuals being willing to step forward and be vulnerable, sharing their unique lived experience, which is going to shape business frameworks and political legislation with empathy rooted at every decision.
The next generation voice is the greatest chance that we have for change, for an inclusion revolution that means everyone, and no one is left behind.
Hi, Tiffany.
Hello.
Hello. So glad to have you back.
Hello.
Ah,
So there's a lot of like really cool things you'd mentioned about like the theater and going through that. The first thing that I kind of want to know about myself would be the haptic tour, the experience there. So that's basically where you have like sensors or vibrations and things like that, so you can sense space that's out from your body. Is that right? Or how would that work in this case?
That is one use of the term, yes, but that's actually not what I'm referring to in this case.
Okay.
What it is it's a pre-show, sometimes also called a touch tour, but we prefer using haptic because it encompasses more than just simply like touching something. So what it is a pre-show tour, usually for a live like theater or dance performance show, and it's where you can take a lot of blind or low vision folks will go around and get to feel the set or walk the space or have hands-on of the props or costumes, get to feel some of the bigger like dance movements in a show, maybe like for the ballet or something. So then when it's described with the lot, then it will have live audio description for the show, or maybe a recording, a recorded description that's synced. And then you'll have an idea of, oh, I felt that movement. Oh, I felt, and the dancers or performers also will come and often introduce themselves or do a self-description, perform some of the movements, let you feel their costumes. So then it can identify, oh, this is their voice if they're speaking. Oh, I know, how they identify. I know kind of more what they look like. I know what this movement feels like. So it helps you get kind of a setup for the show that you're going to see, because you have an idea of the space or the sounds or the, what's going on stage.
Yeah, you get to put yourself in the shoes of an actor in some sense, then to be able to feel the outfit or to be on the stage where they are, to kind of have the movements demonstrated for you, so you know what to expect. There's a lot of different senses that come from the theater, and the only things that we get from the movies a lot of time, it's just the visuals and the audio, and that's it. But there's so much more tactile to it, the sense of the theater itself. It's great
Yes.
that we get to explore that and you get to have a specialized tour. I think that's wonderful to see. What kind of productions have you been able to facilitate this with?
We've done a lot of different tours for different shows. We work mostly with the company I work with, Gravity. We have Gravity Access Services is the name of this branch of the company that provides the audio description. And we've done it a lot primarily for dance and like local venues to the Bay Area. We recently did a performance the first time for actually Cal Berkeley, for the university. In the fall, we did Cloud Gate of Taiwan was a company that was visiting, and so we got to do a haptic tour for that and audio description, which was really neat to be able to see some of the costumes and have some of the movements described. We've also done them for San Francisco Ballet, like for the Nutcracker. That was a little more limited. We were not allowed to actually be on the stage or work with the performers, but we were able to meet with one of their dance leaders and hear about the movement. And someone asked, like, I don't know what a Nutcracker is, and so they got one from the gift store. We couldn't see the actual Nutcracker, so they have different rules and unions and all those type of things.
Oh,
Kind
yeah.
of can sort of, depending on which type of show you're doing.
Well, that
But
would be
still,
like,
we were able to provide something to the audience.
what was that, like an international ballet troupe then that you were working with then for the Nutcracker?
No, it was this
No.
at the
Okay.
San Francisco Ballet.
Okay, I gotcha. I was just
So it was their actual company. Yeah.
Yeah, I gotcha. Um, so yeah, it just definitely lots of different factors to that, like the visuals of the Nutcracker, and then ballet. The audio is a lot of that. That you
Hmm.
get to be as a part of, like the pit and things like that. Were you able to
Hmm.
experience like the orchestra up close?
We were not for that show, but for other shows we have done that.
That's beautiful.
For that show we did not get to do that, but we did get to sit closer to the stage, and so that can be helpful too for low vision folks. Or they have something called we call stealth access, where sitting closer to the stage you can hear more maybe of the movement,
Yeah.
and or hear the music better. So depending on how big the theater is and where you're located can also make a big difference in terms of hearing like what's happening on stage as well, and like hearing the actors, and getting the using the other senses as well, or feeling things from the stage. And we had one tour we did for a company where someone had point shoes, and then I brought up, well, what do point shoes look like? Because a lot of people don't know what point shoes are like in ballet. And so then they described them, and we got to feel the point shoes. And that's something that you might not even notice, that, oh, I don't know what that is, or what are your traditional images of a ballerina? Like you might not know what that is, or what are the tutu and all the everything else.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's a great piece of access to theater, and a great way to expand our experiences of each other. We get to learn from the people with disabilities what we can do to provide a better experience for them. And we learn from you, and you can, we can learn from each other so much. We've got a little bit of time limit here. We're going to be trying to cut out at 2 o'clock. So I just want to make sure we've covered all of the points that you wanted to speak about. Is there anything else that's on your mind you'd like to speak about, Tiffany?
I mean, there are a lot of topics I could talk about, but
100%.
um, yeah, I think well, we were talking about resources earlier, and I also want
Mhm.
to shout out another podcast. I did an episode for it; hasn't aired yet, but it is a great. It's called the Disability After Dark. Andrew Gurza runs that, is a queer disabled person, and talks a lot more about disability, sexuality, queer identity. A lot of that is the main focus of their show. So I definitely recommend that. And that's, I think, a great resource to learn more about intersectionality as well. And I know that's something that um, I speak about as well, and what how that impacts my uh, my viewing of things and the world. And I've had people say to me, regarding like the queer community, saying, I've had other queer people tell me, I didn't know there were like queer disabled people. Or, because you're blind, I've had people say, oh, how do you know that you're queer, or that you're gay, or that you're, whatever your identity is. And it's those type of things that just perpetuate those stigma, that like disabled people cannot be queer, cannot be wanting romantic relationships, physical relationships, partners, hobbies, work, anything that anybody else wants. And so I think these are big issues that need much more discussion, and things to highlight and talk about, and draw attention to. And I think that I felt much more supported in disabled spaces as a queer person than I have in queer spaces as a disabled person. And
Mm,
then how do those things meet and maybe mesh together?
yeah.
I think makes a big difference. Another organization that I am in is called Blind LGBT Pride International, and it's
Mhm.
an affiliate of the American Council of the Blind. And we have also a lot of great resources too on that. And people don't have to be blind to join, but of course that's the majority of the members are blind or low vision and LGBT in some way. And we are really the only it's an international organization, and we are really like the primary organization in that arena. And definitely appreciate and welcome allies in that community as well, to be part, to learn more, to want to help. And we have a podcast called Pride Connection that is run in that group.
Oh my God, we love podcasts.
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you for
Are
providing those
there
resources for you.
are there
Right.
any questions that you wish we had asked that we didn't touch on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay.
Uh,
Well, I've got three big questions just kind of go through here just to sort of establish like kind of our scope. We call them our big three questions. But basically, what do you want to see changed in the world? What can we make effective? What would you like to see effective within your lifetime if you could achieve those goals?
Well, definitely, I think one of the big things too, in especially in the U.S., but is the healthcare situation, and so many disabled people also don't have marriage equality. So we talk about equal marriage, and like, oh, here, everyone's like, oh, you can get married. I'm like, that's nice, but I'm also disabled, and a lot of people rely on Medicaid or in-home support services and all these things that they would lose if they get married, or these services are only provided if you get Social Security or supplemental security income, all these really kind of ableist and problematic ways that are meant to keep a lot of people in poverty or out of access to different things. So that's something I'd love to see more discussed is, the medical system, but also just like marriage equality for disabled people does not exist.
Yeah. So actual equity, like actually
Right.
having fair treatment of people in that. How far would you go to see that change and affected in society?
Well, I mean, I have done different, protests before and rallies and events and, advocacy to, where I can and, trying to do the best that I can to support not just my community, but other communities as well. And there are, a lot of multiply marginalized people in many of these communities intersectionally. And so I try, do the best I can to support, to support anybody saying, this is a problem and we definitely need to work on it and bring more attention to it because a lot of people don't even know about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I see your efforts in your life, and I applaud your efforts to make a more accepting community and open space for everyone. Are you willing to work for a goal that you might not see attained in your lifetime?
Yes. I mean, honestly, I think a lot of these goals I'm working toward, and this, especially right now politically with all the, everything surrounding LGBT issues, trans issues, all that going on. I mean, working with a lot of those, but then everything is so complex and, so many different states have different rules. And then in the country, everything changes. And then, how does that play out in other countries? Or, where can I go? There's certain places I'm not going to go as a disabled person, even on my boat, or, as a queer person or with my partner who's trans, like we can't go certain places. But does that mean I'm not going to work for people in those places? No, because a lot of the people in those places are still in these communities and they need the most help because these people are kind of oppressed and held down by the societies we live in. So I'm, definitely willing to support other people, even if they're not me or my community, because they don't have this kind of support. Even if I can't necessarily go there, it's not the citizens' fault.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well,
in a large part.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Tiffany Taylor, it's been
whoa,
a
whoa,
pleasure
whoa,
speaking.
Athena,
Oh, wait, come on. Look, we know how it
no,
goes.
we
We
have
wrap
some
up
more
like
questions.
5 times. I know we
No,
got more questions, but I wanted to
no.
get that one in. Okay, fine. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You can do that. We'll do it a few more times. I do like 10 outros and then I go through and pick the best one.
It's true. She does.
I really
Just
do.
caught me in the middle. Well, Tiffany Taylor, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today about disability and your experience in the theater, as well as sailing around the world. Just excellent to kind of see somebody that's so free out and about. And any parting words you'd have for us today?
Thank you for having me. And I'm happy, here to be able to share my little bit of the world and, where I fit and what we can do to bring some more change.
We'd love to hear it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, now wait, hold on, don't go. Wait. Mar has some questions.
Okay.
Honestly, it was just going to be something very lighthearted. So, Tiffany, you being on a boat, I'm going to say this. I feel sort of silly. Will you please make a video when you guys take off from Marina with the Jack Sparrow Pirates of the Caribbean music on it? We would love to see you do that and experience the experience you're having, because to me, like, I love the water too, but I don't really get out on it and sail or anything like that anymore. So could you please provide us with that?
Yes, I enjoyed those movies. My partner, it's funny, she always falls asleep to them, so it's kind of a joke of like, but that would be definitely entertaining. And I sail with a group in the Bay Area called the Bay Area Association of Disabled Sailors, based in San Francisco. and we sail little dinghies and have special adapted boats, and we have a cool flag that has like a little uh, pirate on it, and like, you know, disability, and I'm like totally up for it.
Okay, well, that will make my day just to see that.
Yes.
Because I always try to look for something very lighthearted, because so heavy in the world sometimes.
Yes,
So
definitely.
I'm gonna here's my last question, Caroline. What is a guilty pleasure you have to bring that lightheartedness into your world?
Well,
no.
I really like, I mean, again, my main thing, you know, is musical theater. So I like singing and performing as well. And yeah, I'm a big Julie Andrews fan. I know like all the Julie Andrews things. So anybody ever wants like a quiz about that, I will be there. So I usually just bore people with my facts of musical theater.
I bore people with other facts, so it's fine. And honestly, one of my guilty pleasure show from the theater, and I've seen it live and I know the movies, is Mamma Mia.
Nice.
Just get me going on ABBA, and I'll be grooving. I'm dancing right now on the screen a little, Tiffany. We're very white person type.
Yep.
So that's a very big guilty pleasure. So I'm glad to know that I now have someone with a lot of Julie Andrews,
Yes.
knowledge up there. So I'll hit you up before I
All
do
right.
trivia next time.
All right.
Tiffany, what's been your fondest memory or proudest achievement in your life?
Wow, that sounds like well, one of the things that really sticks out to me is with the dance company that I'm performing with now, Just Critic Gravity. We're based also in Berlin, and so I'm going actually back there for the show we're working on currently in October, and I was also there in 2019 to perform a new piece that we had created, and so that was really, you know, a big moment to be able to, you know, work professionally and travel and, you know, get kind of an inclusive inclusive cast, inclusive company, you know, accessibility costs included in that, and be able to travel. My partner also came for part of the time, so that really kind of stuck out as like, I don't even necessarily have formal training, but I'm able to, you know, have this space to really do the things that make me, you know, happy and hopefully challenge some perceptions.
You would say that art is a very big part of your life. What does art and that expression mean to you?
I think art has a way of just being very healing and healthy, but also fun and fulfilling and enjoyable. It can also educate and help, you know, other people see things in themselves, and also, you know, challenge their views, or even just present different ways of thinking, and in so many different modes and mediums in a way that, you know, nothing else can.
What would you like to see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
That's always the question.
I know, right? It's the cliche.
It's okay.
I know, it's like it's a job interview. Please tell
Yeah.
us.
Like, where would you well, we're on the boat, so in some, you know, some warm destination. I know some islands, you know, maybe the San Blas Islands, or somewhere, you know, somewhere with some tacos and a beach.
So I missed the last part of this. So what would you like to see in the world in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think, you know, more inclusion, more acceptance, more support of each other. I think we're really going down the wrong roads to inclusion or learning from history. So really just, I think, you know, more supporting each other as a whole, you know, better systems, better infrastructure.
Tiffany, I feel that I phrased that question wrong, and I'm sorry if in this interview I lacked in my awareness to be respectful, and if I've said anything that is off-putting, I'm so sorry.
Not at all. No, not at all.
I know, because I said, what, you know, it's in some my guess. My next question is, you know, with everything that we've talked about, our listeners are hearing all of this. What can we do going forward together to create a more accessible and inclusive world, and to ensure that all of us have our rights met?
think advocating, but also finding other people to hold you up when you need support doing the work, and we can't do the work alone. We need to make framing community as a positive space and not a negative of you're in this community, but that community is actually, mutual aid is what actually gets the job done.
Mutual aid, direct action.
Now let's say goodbye. So, oh my gosh, Athena, that was such a good time. I'm so glad to have you here today with us.
Happy to be here to talk and be a part of the conversation, making sure that everybody is heard and a part of the conversation, part of the narrative. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. Mara Newell, thank you for joining us as our guest co-host today, and I can't wait to have you back on again.
It was a pleasure to meet all y'all first time, and I loved it. Tiffany, thank you so much for everything you shared with us. I will be first in line for the movie, so we need to work on that producing.
Thank you.
Tiffany, thank you so much for being here with us today. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. Okay, now we can finally. Okay, so now we're good.
Okay, breathe.
All
Everybody breathe.
Yeah, I
Let
hope
down
my
your
internet
hair.
was good enough to at least, put things together and get enough material.
I'm gonna say the cliche thing, and I didn't say this in the show, but I learned a lot today. But I didn't. I feel like also that is my ableist language to think that like it's people with disabilities jobs to educate me, and it's not. So
yeah.
But I'm so glad we had this opportunity. So, and
I think it is their job when they want to do it, right? So it's like it is my job when I feel safe, able, and wanting to do it. Because if I never do it, then that also isn't fair to say, oh, there's no resource. But then also there are published resources. So it's kind of this balance of I'm happy to offer, but it's not a given, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
that is a balance to it. And really, I think by being allies in this, being open to listening to the conversation and reboosting your message, that's probably the best thing that I could think of doing, apart from actually going in and doing the kinds of work that you're doing to try and test out the sorts of compatibility features like you are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm really glad we had this day to spend with you. And Tiffany, you're always welcome to come back on the show with us. It was such a
Well,
pleasure. It
thank
really
you.
was.
Yeah, feel free. Thanks for everybody to follow me or find me or message me or whatever you would like. I'm happy to chat and answer things or just chat about anything that we've talked about or not.
Yes. Okay.
Wow.
Well,
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, I
thank
want
you,
to thank
Tiffany.
all of y'all. Hang on, I know you're about to end it. All three of you, thank you so much for popping my podcast bubble. My see, I almost said something else, but I was like, I'm gonna make it.
Lucy would have made it that.
I know.
It's your cherry.
Right?
We popped your cherry.
Yeah, I know. It's been so long since that's been popped too, so I appreciate it, y'all. This is my first time, but I know it's not gonna be my last, and I appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
Wow.
It's been a pleasure to work with.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, Tiffany, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll see you soon, okay?
Yep. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.